All right, now here are the parts of the wing. Those are all the laser cut parts. There's a few ribs. There's that front piece that makes the leading edge, and then there's the root rib. The two ribs at the root have holes in them for the spar. And there are the skins, top wingtip, and then that's the base. I've added the little teeth on them where they're supposed to go. Teeth on there to hold the wingtip on. And I've curled them a little bit so they have an airfoil where they're needed. And now we have to first glue the little skeleton together. Here is the one side already done, and you can see that it sucks right up to the side of the fuselage. There's no fillet on this airplane. It's just butted right up against there. I found a nice piece of aluminum tubing that works great as a spar. It's kind of accidental, but it works perfectly well. I also colored around the edge, excuse me, because I found out the last one on the other side, the fit is very good, but having a little bit of color on the edge, nothing that you make is absolutely perfect, so you don't want any white showing around there. So I sped this up, but it's just adding glue, making sure these are relatively straight. You put glue in the slot, you put glue along the rib where the spar is going to attach it, and you slide that in place. Those holes you see on those two are really important, and they're really well organized or well designed. Oh, in this part, you just butt this up. There's a little, I hope you can see it, outline on the part that shows where it's supposed to attach. And then that slides right in there. Those holes are going to be, I think, for landing gear. The main circular one is, and I think the other part is for some kind of a strut. But these get glued in and slid into these slots on the front of those ribs, and then that becomes the leading edge. What I was saying is those holes at the base, or those two ribs, are really well done because you just take a nice straight piece of spar, and when they go through and attach and slide through, you get automatic dihedral, and it's gorgeous. It's really lovely. It fits. I've had this thing as straighter and truer than most plastic models I build. It's amazing. Anyway, these slide in. Takes a little bit of kind of futzing around, but it's not hard to do. You just want to make sure they all go on straight, and I'm being careful because you don't want to squash and bend the laser parts there. If it was balsa wood, it might be a little easier actually, but as long as you're careful, these things slide right in. By the way, when you take these pieces out of the laser part, you just make sure you sand off the nubs that are left over when you cut them out. There's just little tiny little nips on there. So just take those off and then make sure that'll make sure everything fits nice. And then that edge has to be flat against the piece. Now I'm showing here, the thing is made so that there's even little tiny slots cut out that correspond to where those teeth go in. The thickness of those from there to there actually fits into those little slots. That's the attention to detail that has been done with these computer, I guess, CAD drawn stuff, and then when the laser cut parts are made. It's pretty cool. So this is a butt joint on here, and again, you can see when you look at the actual rib what the part where the spar is supposed to go and the leading edge. So I just put it in, excuse me, end on, and that made it easier for me to get it on. And then you just make sure it's straight. You sight down the trailing edge, make sure there's not a rib that's excuse me, shooting up or down, warped, whatever. I want to make these things as straight and as nice as you possibly can. Looks good. So, excuse me again. That root rib I found the other side actually gets bent out a little bit. There's a curve there. So it is not completely flush or flat, I mean. And that fits with the contour of the fuselage. So the leading edge gets right up to the edge. I'm just test fitting this inner skin. That gets put on just so, excuse me, and making sure that the rib and the second rib attaches where it's supposed to, just straight and nice. But then the lower part is going to be a little bit longer, which is okay because that correlates to the fuselage underside. And then the trailing edge of that root rib right there that I'm gluing up is going to actually be bent out a little bit to follow the contour. So now I put this on here and I make sure, like I said, the root edge or the leading edge is flush with the laser cut rib right there. And I don't worry about the trailing edge quite yet. And all I'm doing here is making sure that the spar gets glued. I'm making sure that it's straight on that second rib, and I'm putting a little pressure down so that the glue starts to tack on that rib. I'm not worried yet there. Now there I start to pull out that rib, and then I make it flush just a tiny bit. It's not something that you bend and put pressure on, but you just bend it slightly. And that gives you the contour you're going to need right there. So you make sure that top piece is done. I don't do the whole thing at once. I work on the top first. I guess, or the bottom, either way. I just figure the top, if it looks good, I can fake the bottom if I do something really bad. The top is what you're going to look at. Anyway, once that's together, then you unfold it and you put on the bottom. So you're just adding glue along where those, where the skin is going to attach to those, the bottom part of the ribs. And make sure you put some up at the leading edge there, and along the spar and on the trailing edge. And now you pull this over tight, and the trailing edges should line up, and then you know you're okay. And then you can see on the edge there, I'm trying to make sure that everything's coming in contact. You don't want to have big valleys and things. You want to make sure that everything just kind of looks like it's the shape of the airfoil. But there, that root looks good. The rest of it looks fine. So there's that piece in. Now, to get this started, I kind of got the trailing edge together and then sort of, pinched things to just get that leading edge starting to roll over. And there I'm putting in a little bit of camber on the upper surface to help follow the airfoil that's on the rib. And then you got to test fit this till you're blue in the face. The key, however, is to match up those panel lines, these two. You match those up to the root part and make sure they are flush and beautiful. And again, I'm going to start on the top first and get the spar figured out and all that. Then I'll worry about the bottom. So add a little glue along the rib or along the root to get it started. And again, the idea will be to first get that piece started. Get all the ribs and the spar parts glued, get them all nice and ready to go. Then you put that sucker on there and you make sure that those pieces are lined up. And usually what I tend to do is you can sort of put it on and then kind of wiggle it and just make sure that those lines look like they're one single panel line. And then you keep working along the spar and the rib, and you're just starting to tack it to get it so that it starts thinking about attaching. But you want to make sure that where those two pieces of paper come together, you got very little to no seam. I mean, it's along a natural panel line, but you don't want the Marianas Trench there either. So I'm just making sure it's touching the ribs, upper part of the ribs and the spar. Looks fine. And then here I come from the back and push on those little teeth just to make sure they're coming in contact. And when you're satisfied with that, you then practice and pull the bottom piece over. And this took a lot of playing around at first. Took probably 20 minutes of forming the paper and sort of pulling it and tugging it and making sure it's as close as you could to make it nice and even. Ideally you just fold it over and it matches perfectly. In this case, this one did, and I had to really kind of form that leading edge a little bit more and really pull it. And you can see I'm pulling it kind of tight. And I'm trying to make sure it's as close as I can to that edge. The trailing edge is matching up as best I can. And I'm trying desperately to get that seam to disappear. And on this side, of course, the side I'm showing you, I didn't get it as good as the other. But you see I'm pulling. I see my thumbs are tight and white there, I'm putting a fair amount of pressure on that, trying to pull it into place. But I'm getting to the point where I think I'm about as good as I can get it. So there I'm starting to sort of just kind of tap it in place, put a little extra pressure on there. And then you can do things like lay it down flat like this and get the trailing edge together. And you just play with it. Now look at that. There's a white part there and I couldn't get rid of it. So I resorted to actually trimming it. Shouldn't have to do that. That's not the model's fault. That's a misalignment somewhere. But no harm done. The eye is not going to see that tiny, tiny sliver I removed. And then all you have to do is recolor that little edge and no one will be the wiser. And since no one watches these videos, no one will know. However, you just go back and touch up some things like that. And so when that disappears and it will look fine, you won't be able to tell there's a little sliver off on the aileron. Yeah, it's gonna be fine. And then here I'm making sure there's a little piece there that instead of cutting it, I actually just did a little coloration. But there's that top skin on. Looks pretty good, especially just from a regular viewpoint. There it is all the way around. That part is the worst part. There's a split there and it ticks me off. However, it's okay. That's my point of my hand gestures there. Now, put on the end, and you can see it's just self-explanatory, but I did pre-curl that edge piece, including the leading edge is rolled over because it has to go over and come in contact with the other bottom of the leading edge that it's also curled up. So again, lining up your panel lines first and then going around and making sure that your edges are all nice. In this case, again, I got as close as I could, but I ended up having a little white showing and I could not get rid of it. I kept playing around trying to form it, and I did pretty well, but I still had to do some cosmetic surgery here. And that's, again, not the end of the world. So right now I'm making sure the trailing edge is straight. I'm making sure how many warps. It's all really good, but you can see a little white outline on that leading edge. Did the same thing. Pushed it down so that it's as close as I can get it. And then I resorted to just chopping that off. Just very little straight shots. Just taking little bits off at a time. Does not look bad again. Never know that I had to do that. Again, this is the American in me, and the Pole in me has disappeared. But rolling that around, and I think it'll look okay. You can see there's white there, but that's all right. I can recolor that. And then since it's a little bit ragged, I actually resorted to taking a little tiny piece of sandpaper and just rolling it around the edge, trying to take away too much color, but just enough to smooth it. You can see that's all it took. You don't have to sit there with a belt sander and a mask and run it down. Just a little bit to sort of give it a little bit of smoother edge. And then here I add a little bit extra glue because I had pulled up part of that edge there. And then you add your glue. Your glue acts as a little bit of a filler, and you sort of tweak things and push them and tug them. And then at the last second, I still needed to fill this in with a little brown because this is the part that I trimmed off. But you can see that when you're all done, it looks lovely. It looks just fine. You're not cheating. It's just that that's just telling you there's something that you probably did wrong. In my estimation, experience so far, usually if something's bad on one of these computer drawn kits, it's something you did. It isn't the kit. In this case, there's my wing panel. I think it looks awesome. Looks really good. So all I got to do is slide that sucker on and see how it fits up against the root. And so I'm testing this, and what I had to do was I took some extra aluminum tubing I had and spent about 5 minutes kind of gouging out or reaming out that hole, got it to fit and go in, and now I'm just putting a little bit of glue on that piece, not a lot, just a little bit. And then this is going to, again, butt up against the fuselage side, so I make sure when I put the glue down, it's sort of, it's going to be able to go up there and fill little gaps and things. And since I test fit this again, I'm amazed how when you put these wing panels on, I was very dubious of this, they suck right up to the fuselage side. And again, there's no fillet to hide. I mean, a fillet hides a lot of sins. And you don't have to. This actually goes right up against it. It's like a wildcat. And I don't need a fillet. And I am just amazed. So you put it on there and you follow the little lines. You can see the lines where they're supposed to go. And you just sort of push this thing in and make sure it's where it's supposed to be. I use my brush and get off a little extra. And then I kind of hold it and squeeze it together. Just give it a little push and kind of hold it. And as you do that, the glue is going to set. It's already very good, actually. And you take your brush and you play around with the root a little bit more on the bottom as well. I don't think I show that, but you do the same thing. Take off the excess glue, because as you push it, it kind of squeezes out. And you just make sure that it's good. And now you just take the time to sort of admire your job here. And making sure, for instance, the dihedral is good. They're even. The tail's even. Like I said, I can't get plastic models to look like this. So the designers really knew what they were doing on this sucker. So there it is. And I'm just trying to show overall how it looks. It really does. It's pleasing. Some people think it's kind of a homely airplane. I think it's actually really pretty. It's got a kind of a square front end, maybe. It's got struts and things on it, but I don't know. The wing plan form and the tails are quite pretty, I think. So this one is coming along very well. We'll probably play around with the landing gear next so we can get the nose off the ground, and then we'll work on the propeller and the canopy, and yeah, she'll be done. So we're pretty close now.